All right, and we're live. Welcome back. So today I'm going to be doing something just slightly different. Hopefully the audio is working, and hopefully everyone can hear me. If not, I will just delete the video. So today I want to talk about some of the things that you need to know as a developer. If you're a new developer, you might be avoiding them. I know that I certainly did for way too many years, and looking back, I should have learnt these things a lot sooner. And so I thought that today I would pick three and I would actually talk about them, why you need to know them, and why you're probably going to be expected to know them if you want to become a software developer anytime soon, if you want to do it as a hobby or if you want to do it as a career. If you're doing it as a hobby, it's less serious, but you probably still also need those skills. So I think it's worth making a video about this. I haven't got much AI news today, so I thought I'd put my beanie on and talk about software development instead. So let's get into it. All right, so today I want to talk about first Git. Git is created by the same guy as Linux, and it's about source code management, it's version management. So what does this mean? Essentially, when we're working on a software project, we need to ensure that as we improve it, as we work on it, we can share our code in a better way. When you're working on a software project, you can get this problem, which is you can have conflict in your code. You can have an older version that isn't compatible with the new version and things like that. And so you have Git born. And what that is it allows you to manage every single version and every single improvement in your code. Every time that source code changes, you can actually basically timestamp that and you can move backwards and forwards. Again, I'm aiming this video for people that don't know about this stuff, so the language I'm going to try and use is going to be understandable to everyone, but please comment down below if you don't understand what I'm talking about. Alright, so Git is free to use, it's free to install, it's free to learn. I'm not going to do a tutorial, but this is something you need to learn. Now, it's kind of daunting because a lot of it is done through the command line. So there is actually another piece of software that you can install called Git Kraken, which visualizes Git. And I love Git Kraken. There are other alternatives. I use Git Kraken, I have from the beginning, and it helped me understand what actually is Git. What is this this source control? How do I use it? What's the terminology? Git Kraken is free, again, to use in non-commercial projects. I love it, and that allows you to collaborate, share your code base, and more crucially than ever, it allows you to undo what you've done and sort of visually see where you went wrong, as opposed to kind of trying to memorize it or do it through the command line. It just is really a wrapper around Git. It has some new features. It has some sort of project management features as well. But for me, I just use it as a visual way of understanding Git, of using it, of managing it. So yeah, that's what I use. That's what I use Git Kraken for. So the first thing you should probably learn is Git. All right. The next thing is, where are you going to store your code? You can store it locally, but maybe you want to back it up in the cloud. We use the terminology a repository in the development world. Excuse me, I'm getting out of breath. All right. Okay, so often we'll use something called a repository, which is just a remote place to store your code. That's all you need to know. One of the most popular ones is GitHub. So on the same theme as Git, GitHub is owned by Microsoft, as is a lot of different things, and it's free. So you can store your code once you've worked on it in GitHub, on GitHub. And the cool thing is you can bring all your source code management with you, so you can track different versions on GitHub, and you can open source your project so that people can download them, or they can fork them, or they can clone them, and then contribute to them and re-upload, and you can either basically approve or disapprove of those changes, and that's how open source works. So GitHub is a remote repository. Think about it. If you wanted to, like, really simple terms, GitHub is like a remote sort of Google Drive to store your code, but it's purpose built for storing and managing programming projects. So GitHub is probably where you've been downloading, if you're new to the world of development, it's where you've been downloading code from. Maybe you've been downloading it as a zip file, but you can actually just do git clone and then a GitHub URL, and it will get that code from GitHub and it will put it onto your computer. So if you haven't used Git Kraken and GitHub, I really recommend that this is where you start, because this will basically help you transition from understanding programming and how to actually write code through to being a developer, which is using those skills on an actual live project, and that will prepare you for the working world much better than learning a new package in Python. All right, the next one is getting a little bit more complicated. We're moving to Docker. You should probably learn Docker. Docker is weird to get your head round, but essentially think of it like this. When you work on a programming project, the chances are you're going to be installing a bunch of stuff onto your computer, and then you upload the code to GitHub and you try and share it with someone, and in order for them to get your project to work on their computer, they have to go and install all of those things and set up their computer like your computer was when you made the project. And it's a nightmare, especially if you're trying to move fast. So like, let's say you have a really popular website and you need to boot up a bunch more servers. You don't want to be manually configuring those computers. That's where Docker comes in. Docker allows you to contain all of those dependencies and packages and things that you installed. It's essentially the whole status and setup of your computer as its own thing, as its own file. We call that a Docker file, and that's just instructions of how to configure that computer to run your source code, to run your project. The cool thing about Docker is that it can run on basically any operating system, and it can run layers of different containers to achieve basically anything. So for example, we use Docker at my company to configure new Molly hardware. What that means is that we get like a Raspberry Pi, we could plug it in, we can install a Docker container, and the Docker file will basically configure that Raspberry Pi with all the packages and everything. It will just go off and it will install all the things it needs, so we can just quickly move. All we have to do is put the Docker container onto that Raspberry Pi, and Docker will handle the rest, configuring everything, downloading the code from GitHub, booting everything up, checking everything, running any tests. So Docker is incredible. If you can get your head around Docker, I really recommend that you do. Look at Git first, but Docker is certainly something that you should probably learn. And it just put in like some hours of work, just like a couple of hours, just to understand what it is and why you need it. You don't have to use it immediately, but it will be useful and you will come across Docker. All right, the final thing is React. So if you're really new to programming, you probably heard about React and you probably aren't using it. And the reason you're probably not using it is probably because you can't quite understand what it is and why you need to use it. React is a front-end JavaScript library. It runs in the browser, but it can also run in apps as well, but I won't touch on that now. Basically what React does is it simplifies web languages. So it reorganizes your traditional HTML, JavaScript, and CSS into a really, really minimal, simple format. And what that allows you to do is just write web apps really, really clearly and easily. Hello, Harry, welcome. Yes, all of these things are free. So yeah, all of these things are free. If you want to learn them, you can learn them for free. They're open source. Everybody uses them. I just hit my microphone. Everybody uses them. And so, yeah, React is what I personally use to create Java's front end, so the interface. But it's essentially the underlying technology of a lot of different sites. It's the most popular front-end framework. There are some alternatives like Angular and Vue and Svelte. I can't think of any of the others off the top of my head, but React is super, super popular. I would recommend using it. I came from Angular world. I moved to React about a year and a half ago. I really regret not doing it sooner. And essentially what it'll allow you to do is build websites and web apps much more simply if you can get your head around having HTML and JavaScript on the same page, which I really struggled with to begin with. But if you can get your head around that, it's just basically writing things in just pure JavaScript to interface maybe with a Python server that's running in a Docker container, and you control all of the source code through Git. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, definitely make sure you subscribe and you hit the notification bell for this channel, and I will catch you in the next stream.